There are stories that begin quietly, and then there are stories that explode into existence with the force of a secret waiting decades to be told. This one begins on an ordinary morning, in an ordinary university classroom, where something extraordinary was about to happen. Students filed in lazily, chatting, complaining, and scrolling on their phones, unaware that their lives would soon become witnesses to a moment that would challenge pride, redefine brilliance, and remind everyone how unpredictable destiny can be. Because on that day, a single equation on a whiteboard would flip an entire world upside down, and the person who solved it wasn't a genius professor, wasn't a prodigy student, and wasn't even a mathematician. He was the janitor sweeping the floor, wearing gloves still dusted with chalk someone else had dropped. If you believe in kindness, humility, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe right now. It truly helps the channel grow and keep stories like this coming. The tension in the room had started long before the moment everyone talks about. Professor Elena Hartley was known for being brilliant, charismatic, and sometimes a little too confident in her own intellect. Teaching advanced mathematics at Ridgewell University, she carried herself with elegance and authority, the kind that made students admire her yet kept a distance they didn't dare cross. On that morning, while explaining a particularly intricate problem about nonlinear dynamics, she drew an enormous swirling equation across the board symbols, stacked in ways that made half the class dizzy. She circled the final line dramatically, knowing very well that none of her students could crack it. It was an equation considered unsolvable at undergraduate level. Perhaps she was showing off, or perhaps she was simply challenging them. But then something unusual happened. She made a joking common tone she assumed was harmless for the sake of entertainment. It was the kind of statement meant to provoke laughter and lighten the room. But fate has a strange way of twisting jokes into promises. At the back of the classroom, the janitor, Holden Ray, was emptying the trash bins. He kept his head down, focused on his job, moving with quiet discipline. He had been working at Ridgewell University for almost 3 years. Students often overlooked him, barely noticing the way he meticulously arranged chairs, wiped down desks, and cleaned chalk dust before morning classes. He moved like someone used to being invisible. But that invisibility hid the truth about him, a truth even he had buried beneath the weight of life's disappointments. Holden hadn't always been a janitor. Years earlier, he had been a mathematics prodigy with a scholarship to one of the country's top universities. But life rarely goes in straight lines. After losing his father and becoming the caretaker for his younger siblings, he dropped out. He took odd jobs, construction shifts, and eventually janitorial work to keep his family alive. The formulas he once loved slowly slipped away into memory, like pages of a book left outside in the rain. So on that morning, when Professor Elena jokingly said that she would marry whoever solved the equation, laughter rippled through the class. She didn't mean it literally, it was simply her way of emphasizing its difficulty. Students smirked, rolled their eyes, and some even looked embarrassed at how impossible the challenge felt. But Holden heard the words differently. He wasn't thinking about the joke, the marriage comment, or the attention such a statement would bring. Instead, he found his eyes drifting toward the board almost on instinct, as if something deep inside him had awakened from years of silence. The strange familiarity of the symbols pulled him closer, tugging at an old version of himself, the version who had once dreamed big, studied fiercely, and believed he had a future. The students watched in confusion as Holden stepped forward. His movements were hesitant at first, uncertain of whether he should even approach. But curiosity, or perhaps courage, won. He set down his broom, took off one glove, and lifted the whiteboard marker gently, almost reverently. The room fell utterly silent. Professor Elena stared, and behind her expression of surprise was something else, an unspoken challenge. Holden didn't notice. His mind had already entered a space it hadn't visited in years. Symbols danced in his thoughts like old friends. Memories of long nights studying, scribbling equations, struggling and overcoming, they all rushed back. Piece by piece he began rewriting parts of the equation. His hand trembled at first, but gradually steadied. Lines formed, patterns emerged, and then a path toward the solution revealed itself, as though it had been waiting for him all this time. Minutes passed like heartbeats. Chairs creaked, breaths were held, and eyes widened as the janitor connected concepts students had barely begun to understand. When he finally stepped back, the equation stood completed, the impossible solved with stunning clarity. For a long moment, nobody moved. The silence was thick enough to feel. Professor Elena's expression shifted from disbelief to awe, the kind of awe that humbles even the most confident of minds. She knew instantly what she was looking at. Not luck, not a guess, genius. But what struck her more deeply was the realization etched across Holden's face. He wasn't proud. He wasn't boasting. He wasn't even smiling. He looked sad, as though solving the equation reminded him of everything he had lost, everything he had buried just to survive. And that sadness touched her more than the brilliance on the board. The class erupted into whispers. Rumors would spread across the university within hours. But for that moment, all that existed was a professor who had underestimated someone, and a janitor who had once underestimated himself. Elena approached him quietly, offering gratitude instead of the playful bravado she usually carried. The marriage comment was ignored. Everyone knew it had been a light-hearted remark, but what couldn't be ignored was the truth standing before her. A man who had given up his dreams to support others, yet still carried the fire of a mind built for greatness. Holden didn't stay just a janitor after that day. The university administration learned his story, saw his skill, and helped him re-enroll in courses he once had to abandon. Professors volunteered to mentor him. Students who had overlooked him now greeted him with respect. And Professor Elena, changed by what she witnessed, became one of the people who encouraged him the most, not because of her joke, but because she saw the quiet resilience he carried. She admired not just his intelligence but the humanity behind it. His return to academics wasn't easy. Years away from school had left gaps. He studied late into the night, worked extra shifts to support his family, and faced moments of exhaustion that nearly broke him. But every time he passed by the whiteboard that changed everything, he found strength. He remembered a classroom full of stunned faces, and a professor who realized brilliance can be hidden in the most unexpected places. Months later, Holden received a scholarship, a rare one, given only to students who demonstrated both talent and perseverance. On the day he accepted it, the entire lecture hall applauded, some with tears. Holden wasn't invisible anymore. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life.